Hey guys, there is no denying that we catch a lot of resistance for preaching the gospel of grace. Now, even if people don't understand the theology, they'll at least attack our glorious liberty that comes out of it, or the fun that we have, or some joke we made in 2008. In seeing this resistance, some assume that our attacks on religion and legalism are a reaction of our own bitterness or a knee-jerk hot-headed impulse. But in actuality, we are very calculated in our approach and we make no apologies for our deep distaste of religion. Often people will have an issue with the tone of our message. John, you're mocking. John, you're being too critical. John, you need more sweetness in your approach. John, you're being unloving. Well, look, if I have a mocking spirit, then Jesus must have had one too. And if I am unloving, then so was the Apostle Paul, all right? Because I think we're all in the same boat with some of these issues. You are very right that there's a very mocking and a very intentional jab that I often take, but this is never aimed at individuals. It's always at religion, at religious mindsets themselves, or Phariseeism as a whole. And we're overly clear that individuals should be loved and that we have to bear with the weaker religious brother and not to take personal offense on board. And I've brought several videos out correcting this error over the years, instructing people not to take offense at individual religious people. But I will unashamedly, without apology, continue to tear at the industry of religion itself and set myself against the doctrines of the circumcision party. I am not against religion more than I am for Jesus, but you see, you can't have one without the other. I believe that we have ample biblical support for this type of approach. You got to consider the ministry of Jesus. As he called the religious elite tombs full of dead men's bones, he called them whitewashed walls, snakes. The scriptures also constantly refer to them as whores, as sons of Satan, etc. Now that's some pretty strong language. Now, of course, never once do you see Jesus aiming this rhetoric at an individual person in his conversation or attacking individuals. He always showed compassion on a personal level. He would go to individual Pharisees' house and eat with them. Instead, he aimed his guns at the false, self-righteous identities that men were attributing to themselves, and always in a corporate context. People who, as an entity, were acting as sons of Satan because they didn't realize their adoption from the foundation of the world. As Malachi 2 says, do we not all have one Father? Did not one God create us all? The point is this. Look, the religious order is by far the group that received the harshest rebuke from Jesus. And in fact, he said it would be worse for them than it would be for the gay metropolis of Sodom and Gomorrah, okay? So if you've got to pick a sin, I think religion's a little worse than homosexuality. And just in case we might think that Jesus has a special immunity from politeness just because he's God, well, let's look at the ministry of the Apostle Paul, okay? He called the entire Galatian church beloved idiots. Now note that he still loved them. Here's the thing. This was very much strictly a result of them turning back to religion after he came preaching the grace of the cross. And in speaking of the religious Judaizers, the circumcision crowd, he called them, he said, I wish they would go all the way and castrate themselves, all right? The word Paul used to describe his own self-righteous religious attempts at pleasing God is somewhere between the word crap and dog. Philippians 3:8. He didn't hesitate to call religious teachings doctrines of demons taught by, quote, hypocritical liars whose consciences have been seared as with a hot iron. 1 Timothy 4:2. Specifically in that passage, he was addressing fasting and abstaining from good hot marital sex. Okay, look, Paul didn't seem to pull many punches. In fact, Paul even did what I've never done. He called an individual person, the high priest Ananias, he called him a whitewashed wall. And then later, sarcastically, he said, oh, I didn't know you were the high priest, because Paul knew very well that Jesus Christ is the true high priest. Now, I think that that was a unique exchange, and we shouldn't be calling individuals religious under ordinary circumstances, okay? And everybody thinks their circumstance is an extraordinary circumstance. Look, don't make a habit of this. Look at this. Let's look at the other side of the coin. Over and over, Paul never hesitated to call the Pharisees, the very guys who killed Jesus, he called them his brothers. So his love for them was never lacking. In Romans 1, he says that his heart was constantly heavy for the Pharisees, that they would understand their inclusion in the gospel. Jesus never criticized anyone he wasn't willing to die for. And for Paul, the same thing was true. Their criticism of religion and the false self did not indicate a lack of love. And so let's look at church history a little bit too. All right, we would all still be saying our Hail Marys right now if it wasn't for Martin Luther, if he didn't have a horrible distaste for religion. Martin Luther used vernacular for the religious elite that would make you and I cringe and blush. Here's one example, okay, of dozens of similar kind of things he said, okay? In talking about the Pope, Martin Luther said, "Oh, dearest little Pope, don't dance around, for the ice is solidly frozen this year. You might fall. If a fart should escape while you were falling, the whole world would laugh at you and say, oh, how the Pope has befouled himself." In his booklets, Martin Luther had paintings of the devil giving birth to the Pope out of his rectum. Now that's pretty intense, all right? Few people actually read Martin Luther. They just say, oh, he's one of the most important men in church history. But look, I've read enough of him to know that he cussed like a sailor when he was dealing with religious people. Once he was speaking of another minister, saying how beautiful and eloquent that the guy's religious arguments were. He said that he was like a beautiful golden chalice. And then he said, too bad the chalice is full of. Now, I'm not saying this because I have a problem with Catholics, all right? In fact, most Catholic theologians today, 500 years later, will agree that Martin Luther was right, all right? The issue here is Luther's style. Luther's language was intense, to say the least. I think he may have taken it too far at times, in fact, and many of the people who followed after him moved into outright rebellion, burning down convents, all kind of stuff. But really, at the end of the day, who am I to say that he took things too far? I mean, have I accomplished as much as him? All right, in the role of the reformer, when you're trying to tilt these massive scales of balance back into the right direction, there is a certain intensity that is required. And compromise can be your greatest enemy. So, look, most popes are godly men these days, but praise God, Luther was not afraid to call the Pope an in his day, all right? Also, ministers cannot always be blamed for the extremes to which other people take their thoughts, okay? How many times have people used the very words of Jesus to kill, rape, and destroy? Should Jesus have just kept his mouth shut and kept his thoughts to himself because some people are going to take his ideas overboard? Come on, the best thing we can do is try to bring balance in what we say, but without losing that cutting edge of what has to be delivered. Some people are called to bring soft words. Some people are called to more pastoral type of ministries. On an individual basis, we should always be kind and gentle, but there are certain ministries and callings which are called to bring bigger shifts in corporate thinking, and they're required to make big, grandiose statements. Sharp language is often required. Otherwise, the people will never hear you, and your words will be watered down and impotent. Luther recognized this. He saw the bigger picture. This is what he said, okay? He said, quote, "I was not trying to gain praise and fame with my writings and little books. Almost everyone I knew condemned my harsh and stinging tone, but I thought that even if the present age condemned me, maybe the judgment of future generations would be better." And isn't that exactly what happened? Most of you have never read Martin Luther, but you'd call him a hero. And as for, these erroneous, non-grace teachings that are out there, I will not hesitate to use every tool in my arsenal to pull them down. If Jesus, Elijah, Paul, and others use sarcasm as a tool for good, then so can I. Now, I don't use sarcasm to attack or tear down individuals, but the deconstruction of legalism is the deconstruction of demonic doctrines, and it is the edification of the saints. I can't apologize for that. I love, respect, and honor the church too much. I hate religion, and it's high time that people recognize the difference. I don't attack individuals by name. Now, there have been times where I had to call certain individuals on the carpet who were preaching error, but only after I approached them personally, and the only reason I did it was because they were claiming personal association with my ministry that they didn't have, and so it forced the ball into my court, okay? But that's a different story. It's not that it's right right or wrong to address individuals. The issue is more in line with how it's done, the context in which it's done, and whether it's even your battle to fight. And you better be darn careful that you're operating in love and not paranoia. You have to be careful because it's easy to cross an invisible line into a ministry of accusation, tearing down, inquisition. We cannot deny that in special circumstances, when the gospel of grace hung in the balance, the Apostle Paul was willing to stand toe-to-toe in public with public teachers when the gospel of grace called for it, okay? Alexander the coppersmith, Hymenaeus, he rebuked Peter in front of everybody. Paul even lobbed a couple of subtle bombs at the so-called super apostles of his day, who were no doubt among probably the original 12, but he didn't name them, okay? Look, Paul had he had a message of grace he was carrying, and even those guys didn't seem to catch it as deeply as Paul did. Just in case you haven't read the difference in their letters, all right? Paul was carrying something that he had to protect, all right? Now, this is a touchy subject among people who have been attacked or they've experienced some kind of spiritual abuse or debate and criticism that just run rampant in the church, all right? See, those people who have been frustrated by heresy hunters, I've got a million blogs out there against me, all right? And victims of this stuff have a really bad taste in their mouth when it comes to persons attacking individual ministers, and rightfully so, okay? And yet we can't soft step around the fact that there is even a valid place for bringing public correction to ministers in certain times, in certain isolated situations. Even Paul says to be very careful about this. And it doesn't mean we should go nitpick everybody we disagree with or criticize something just because it's new or we don't understand it. Okay, full investigation is necessary before anybody begins to bring any correction. You got to approach the person individually. You got to talk through things. Most of the time, we just need to trust the Lord to bring the correction himself, all right? And if you don't already have a ministry platform, you're probably not even called to bring that kind of apostolic alignment, all right? Having a Facebook page does not entitle you to be a theology of police for the body of Christ, all right? Look, some people will hate you for pointing out falsehood. They'll say you're being religious and critical. Other people, they have this sort of bloodlust. They like it too much that you're forced to point out somebody's error at times, okay? Here's the thing. Overall, we should allow the wheat to grow up with the tares. We've got to trust God. We're not trying to defend God all the time. But yes, there is a valid place even for the heresy hunter. I mean, where would we be if nobody was willing to address Joseph Smith's heresy of Mormonism or all the crazy Gnosticism in the early church when the early church fathers were battling all these heresies or whatever? Look, there is a place for the heresy hunter. But don't consider it a high office, okay? If we're all part of the body, fingers, knees, and toes, well, the heresy hunter, he's a body part too. There is a part of the body that's needed to push all the crap out of the body, and guess which part of the body that is, all right? It's needed, but it's not a body part I would aspire to be, all right? Look, the fact is, every single one of us is a heretic to some degree. Not everybody believes the exact right thing about everything. And so we need to have patience with one another. We all have the mind of Christ, but it doesn't mean every thought we have comes from the Lord. So we're patient with one another. The only line that's crossed is when teachers start pushing damaging things on people that molest the innocent. And then we need people with cojones to occasionally stand up and address it with both love for the victim and the victimizer. But the love for the victimizer cannot be at the expense of the victim, okay? Just because you don't want to hurt the victimizer's feelings. The issue here is love. We don't go around rebuking people because we're paranoid, insecure, trying to protect a ministry, being self-appointed theology cops, whatever. If love is our motivation, we genuinely want to see people growing, healthy, safe, not weighted down by do-it-yourself doctrines or someone's condemning religious ambition, okay? And we don't want to react out of bitterness, and yet having a hatred for religion is not indicative of bitterness. The scriptures say, hate what is evil, cling to what is good, Romans 12:9. So, love is, the motivation. It's fine if your style is a bit caustic at times, all right? Some people think that I'm being unloving because I don't give space for debate and religious objection on my Facebook page or my YouTube channel or whatever. Look, block is one of my favorite buttons. I'm not saying that I'm right on everything or that every dissenting voice is a religious one. You can disagree all you want, but disagree on your own platform. No preacher in his right mind is going to give an open pulpit for just anyone to come and spout their objections to what he's saying, all right? The same is true for social media platforms. Some people have daddy issues or something because they can't handle any masculinity or aggression or boldness when it comes to standing up for the gospel. Love comes in many packages, not just cuddling, all right? In today's gay hipster culture, we need some preachers with cojones who will stand up for truth. Masculinity is coming back into fashion, all right? Why is it that Christian book industry markets all this pink, pastel, ceramic Cupid garbage out there? It's because the largest Christian market is for middle-aged women. Where are the men? Where are the battle ready? There is a place for politeness and manners, but there's also a time to set aside formalities. Mothers cuddle. Yes, fathers do it too. I hug and slobber over people all the time, but sometimes fathers go out, they hunt, they gather, they rope, they hog tie, they get grease and blood on their hands, all right? There are different packages that love comes in. Just have to be careful we aren't idolizing a certain package, all right? If it isn't mamsy-pamsy, fence riding, let's all just get along, then certain people assume that you have a love deficit. It is loving to dismantle legalistic yokes and burdens that hold people in bondage, and often that requires certain people to go blow up evil stuff and make a mess of things. Okay, I will be honest with you, tact has never been my strongest gift, all right? But that's okay. I don't have to be known for my gift of niceties. It doesn't mean that there's a love deficit just because I use strong language, all right? You have freedom to express this gospel of grace in your own style. Maybe you don't shout, maybe you use poetry. Nothing wrong with that either. You just got to find what suits you. Grace can look like a lot of different ways. It doesn't have to fit into a certain style, all right? I think of Georgian Banov style, for instance. I love Georgian. He's got this sweet, liquid, honey love that oozes out of him. But not everybody expresses love in a mushy way like that. That's okay. Not everybody likes my aggressive style. That's okay too, all right? Don't go stirring up arguments and calling your pastor religious and then blame it on John Crowder's style of ministry, okay? It's funny how everybody tries to mimic style. And that is normal when you first start drinking from somebody that you like. Or, you know, back in when Todd Bentley's stuff was blowing up 8 or 9 years ago, I remember everybody's trying to copy his style. Everybody's got to say Shabba and Boomba and dye their hair blonde and wear fire t-shirts. Okay, look, I totally understand that, and I love Todd. It's just that, you know, we look up the personalities we admire, but eventually, look, you have to own this gospel yourself, okay? Some people are put off by certain styles. Other people are drawn to certain styles like a magnet. Some people will go to any church on the block as long as they have the right vibe and there's a stylish coffee shop in the back, all right? Style is a tool. It is not the substance, okay? Style may be intense, and at times, love itself can look like a bull in a china shop. Absolutely messy, all right? We need not criticize style. We need not mimic style. At the end of the day, just make sure that the substance of love is in there, because it is the only thing that is worth anything. And the only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. God bless you guys. We'll see you next week.